Greetings, pilgrims, and welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage, and today I have something pretty special for you. We are working on a user request challenge for some medieval shields entirely inside of Substance Designer. So these are 100% procedural, and we do have some reference that we're going to look at, and we have two different shields. So let me show them to you. This first one we have here, let's see if we can expand this a little bit. Whoa, there we go. Yeah, take a look at this guy. So this is our first shield. This is called a heater. And that's the type of shape that the shield is. You can see the curved nature here, and then the curves here, and this little inset. And we just have our cross, and we've got the different shapes here with the two different colors that are on opposite corners. And then we have the wood background here. So that the middle part here is made of wood, and then you can see it's been painted. So, pardon me. So that's the first one there. Then we have a different one. So let's go over here, and we're going to take a look at our second type of shield. So let's go ahead and set this up. I'm going to move all of the inputs here. You could do this with a switch node. I just set these up so that I could quickly kind of preview either one of the two that I wanted. So with all of those set, we'll go back and look at our 3D view space and bring this up. And this is a buckler shield type. So you can see that here. And so you've got this nice edge, and I've kind of overblown the scaling here a bit, so don't worry about that too much. But we have the nice outer rim, and it does have some dents and dings in it, and it is also made of wood in the background, but then we have these metal overlapping plates, and this really nice design in the middle here, this little crisscrossy design here. We're going to talk about how we create that quite well. And then, of course, all the sword dings and scratches in the surface. You can see some of that. There you go in the video. You can see the different where, the shield has done its job and protected the wearer. So excellent. Okay, so we're going to go over how we created both of these, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, I am using the high-resolution plane, so that's why you see a little bit of clipping of the edges here. You can see how it's starting to repeat because of the height. So if we go to our materials and edit, and over here we're at 75, I pull that down to something around like 25. You'll still be able to see the shape, and we won't get as much of that. Okay, so we'll start there. So let's first take a look at our reference. That's the big thing. And you can see the two sections here. So the heater is up here, and then the buckler is down here. And I did come up with a pretty cool technique for creating the little dings and dents and, little damage that is over time for these items. They take a lot of abuse. That's kind of the point of them. And then, so I'm going to show you that. We're going to use that over and over again, and you'll see it quite well in here. So first, let's take a look at our reference. So I had this image that, of course, everything's a little stretched. So what I did was I used a transform 2D to kind of even these out. And then I did a separate transform for each reference. And the reason I did this, you'll see that I left some of these in here to show you kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes of my process here, is once I have this reference, I can then do an overlay. And as I'm creating the various shaped elements, I can overlay them. This is a copy 0.74. I overlay it, so now I can actually kind of see how well things are lining up. So I use my reference directly in my workflow so that I can see how things are happening. And of course, these are not 100% accurate to these. Obviously, we don't have the little rivets here. I could not figure out how to get on a pattern like this. And maybe you guys have a suggestion. Maybe we can figure it out together. That'd be exciting. But I try to make sure as close as I can. This one lined up pretty exact. So that was exciting. So let's go ahead and start with the buckler here because we have it up, and we'll work our way through how to do that. So this is our reference, and you can see here that it's got a couple of things to it. We have this outer rim. We have this decorative rim. There's another ring here, which I kind of omitted. I was like, well, let's just go straight into the detailed stuff here, which we probably should add that in eventually because that's what would eventually seal this part to the wood. So that makes sense. But you can see here, that's a difference. I omitted that in the final design. We have these two kind of star type shapes with the little bubbles on the end. And then we have this center part and the center kind of hubcap looking thing. And then the different little divots there. And then I wanted something in the background, so I chose the wood. And I'll show you how we went about making that. So to begin, obviously it's a circular shield. So we start with a circle. So this is a shape node. And I brought down here and chose disk and 0.96. The reason we don't stick with 1.0 is because I don't want it to go all the way to the edge. You get some artifacts doing that. And then most of the rest of these shapes are made off of this shape. And the idea there is let's let Substance do what it does well, and it's all procedural. So now if you want to change the size of this, you could make this half as big, and it would recompute this whole thing based upon that. So that's awesome. Okay, so First trick is to make our ring. So obviously we're going to do a blend. We're going to take in the background our original shape. The foreground is going to be our original shape put into a transform, and it's scaled down a little bit. Okay, I don't recall the exact numbers, but I think it's something like about 90-95%. When you feed this in as the upper or the foreground, the top part, with a subtract, you get this. So your mask now is just that ring. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to do very similar things over and over again. And as you can see, it kind of cascades downward because we're going to take this shape now. So this blend is going to be, okay, we have that inner shape now, and I want to do the same thing to this shape. So make it a little bit smaller, cut it out again. Now this ring is this area that is going to be this decorative part. So it's just from here to here, this area all the way around, okay? Then we're going to do a similar thing again and create another ring, work our way downwards. And then this ring here is the entire shape from here all the way across, less the middle part. So the middle part, what I did was I just went right from here and said, okay, how big is that center part going to be? Once we had that, I can go back and remove that because there's no point to having that middle if it's going to get covered up by something else. Then I created this ring, which is this ring here where the little rivets are. And then the final one is just the cap part, just this part in here. All right, so once we had all of that, what we needed to do was create a couple of different ways of having these little divots and dings in the metal. And so all we're building right now is the height information, just height information, because the shape is what's most important. It's kind of like modeling the way you would in a 3D program, but you're modeling with shapes inside of substance. So what we do is we'll throw our shape, our first ring, into a bevel. And you'll notice here that my numbers are negative 0.03 for the distance, round, 0 smoothing, nonlinear is true, use custom curve false, normal intensity 10, DirectX. I didn't change any of that. And if we zoom in here, you'll see what we're getting here. So it's kind of a gradient from dark to very, very white and then back down to dark. That's what we want because this shape, as put on a flat plane, if you're looking at it, kind of goes up, over, and down again. So it creates that kind of curvature. And you can see that playing out here, okay? You can see that curve right here that we're getting. That's what this is going to give us. So then we're going to blur it just a little bit because what we want is, this was giving us too much of a kind of a plateau. We were curving, stopping, going straight across, curving down again. You might want that. I didn't, so I did a little bit of a blur. Now this is a blur high quality grayscale. The quality, I always jump over to a 1, intensity 2.52. All right, so now what I'm going to do here is this is a blend of these two. So you'll notice here, in the top, I'm blending in with, this is a cutoff. So what we're doing here is I'm taking in this result, but then I'm using the original shape as a mask. The reason is you get a little bit of blurring, a little bit of too much on the edges. And so by using that mask in there, I'm cutting it off exactly so that these shapes will fit perfectly together. Then the levels here is to adjust the height information to make sure that each one I needed to control separately to make sure that this stacked properly so that it looks like this metal is on top of this metal is on top of this wood. This is kind of its own thing, which raises up a little bit higher than this, and then this is the highest thing. So each of these will have a levels, and you'll see we're going to do the same process over and over again. But this, so then you just control here. So this is your height. You just pull this down. So if you wanted something that would be halfway, I would put this to like the halfway point. And now if I look at it, you'll see it got much lower here. So it's halfway down. It's not as high up as it should be. And then we bring that back up, maybe not quite to white, but pretty close to it. There we go. And you see how it adjusts. Very good. Okay. So now, to create the little dings and divots, this I was particularly proud of, and I think it came out really nice. As you can see here, I'll try and zoom in for the video here and play with the light a bit. This little pop mark here and these little dings, and there's a couple more over here, and they go all around. You'll see it looks really nice. There's one right across there and that. It looks really nice in the normal map and in the height map. And the way we got this was by doing this. So I did a scratches generator, and what I've changed here is nothing with the random seed, but I did increase the number. So 256 and 128 for the spline number and the maximum segments per spline. And then I was just playing with the scale. So the scale here is 0.03. I made them very, very small. We've maxed out the scale random and the distortion. Everything else here I think is default. Yes. Start, fade length, all that is default. Then I'm going to blur them just a little bit, and you'll notice here what we're getting here is just these little shapes that kind of, if you look at the white, and then it gradates out. So then, by putting that into our original shape again, so we're going to blend with this on top, with our shape, this in the background. By putting those two together on a subtract, look what happens. We're actually cutting away from our metal band based upon where all of these little guys are, and because these guys are white and gray, a subtract works against a white and gray, and you get these kind of blacker marks, so it makes it look like these little dings and little dents in the metal. And there you go. So you see you've got a couple of them all over the place. And what I do frequently with this is I'll set it up first, then you double click to preview this, click once here, and that allows me to now change these settings, and then I can play around with the random seed and all the values here and watch the update happen. Okay, so this, you'll notice this height build, we do this over and over again. Okay, so I'm going to go through that a lot faster the remaining times, but I just wanted you to understand how that worked. Okay, so we've done our outer ring. Now let's do the decorative ring. The decorative ring, very much the same. You can see here, this one got a lot tighter there, but we blur it out anyway, and then we'll clamp it off, and then the levels, in order to pull it down, you see I've pulled it down to here. And then the same kind of thing, let's put our dings and dents in it, just so he gets a little bit beaten up. Now, this guy's a little interesting because he had to be worked into the path here, because we need this pattern first. So let's take a look at our reference again. I want to show you the pattern very clearly, and we'll work it out. You'll see what it looks like. So this pattern, this is what we're trying to create. These curved lines, it's almost like an oval from up here, which curves out and curves back in, but you can do it with rings too. If you notice, these are giant circles if you follow these lines, okay? And they overlap at these intervals. So let's take a look at how we did that over here. So we come over here, this is a splatter circular, and what I've done is our input is actually this ring, just because it's a nice even ring with about the same thickness that we want, and we can play with it. So I'm pulling from this ring here, okay? So the settings for this are 48 on the pattern amount, 0, 1, 1, let's see, the important thing is image input, radius is 0.44, and then down here, this is the important part here, is the size is 0.25 and 0.1. So that made these things very, very small, and when you put them all together with this, and the scale, so scale them out. So I made them, they are circles, but by making them half a size and then almost less than a quarter size, and then scaling them up by 1.5 times, you start to get that kind of ovular look to it, okay? And then I don't think we messed with any of this. Now all of this is the same. All of this is just by itself. So then we're going to put that into a blend, and let's follow this line and figure out where our mask comes from all the way up here for the area that it's going to be in. And you'll notice that our pattern actually goes and extends beyond that point, but by cutting it off with our mask, we get kind of what we're looking for here. And again, this is not exact, but I really like the way this looks. So I kept this like this. I think it looks really cool. And this gives me a lot of ideas for lots of Greco-Roman kind of patterns. And down here, we've got a couple of things we're doing. So this guy here is a multiply. And let's take a look at what his inputs are. So this is coming directly from our pattern, and we are multiplying it with, up here, the result of this. So putting these two together, because this ring technically has this metal within this like decorative kind of lattice work on top of it. And so I put those two together with a multiply. And you can see here that I'm getting the dings and dents into the lattice work, because that makes sense. If that's on top of it and this gets dented, that's what's going to be there. Then I'm going to put the core metal behind it, because obviously it's got some substance to it where this lattice work is on top of that. So you notice this guy, the foreground is this, and then the background is going back to our ring again. So if I look up here to that guy, okay? So we just put those two together to create this, and this is on a screen with 0.25. And that gives us this. And you'll notice that this is just barely lighter than this, which means it will look like it's right on top of it. Very subtle with the height. And then all of these are just combining everything. So here we're combining this, combining it with the next one, and we'll get to them as we go, but you'll see that there's two rings so far. We've just combined them together. It already looks great here. It looks like a really cool, like almost like a really cool drawing. So that's how you know that your height is looking pretty awesome. Okay, let's go back and let's talk about the inner base. This is pretty simple. This is just this whole area where the wood is going to be, and technically we override some of this because of the other information, but that's okay. Again, take our shape, we do the bevel. I do the bevel here, this time with a distance of 0. It just gives you just a little bit around the edges, and then I'm going to blur it out and then cramp it down, and then we're going to throw it to a level so we can bring this down a bit, and then we're going to throw some dings and dents in it. Same kind of pattern there. There you go. It's got some dings and dents, which of course are going to get overwritten a little bit. And then we combine him with everything else. So that's what we have so far. Cool. Now, to make our star, we need to go over here and start way over here. So to make this star, I'm actually going to borrow from way up here, which we'll come back to this, but our heater, we have a square, which we then rotate 45 degrees. Okay, that's all you need to know for now. But we're going to bring that down here, and I'm going to scale that to kind of create this more diamond shape. Then I'm going to scale it some more, and the reason I did this in multiple transforms is because I needed to get it to a certain size and then scale it a different direction and then scale it differently. You kind of almost can't do all three all at once because you needed to get more of like a transform. It's odd. It's an odd way that it works, but by doing each step at a time, I make sure that I get the right proportions and then it's meeting the right overlay with our reference, and that's what I'm using all the time. So then here we do, this is a pretty common trick that I do if you're not familiar. To create a crisscrossing pattern, you just do a transform and you blend it with a copy of itself. So you take the transform and you transform it and rotate it 90 degrees, put the two together with an add linear dodge, and now you have the overall shape. Okay, so now we needed to add the little circular parts, these little bobules. So again, I'm borrowing from our circle over here that we already have. Just made it smaller, positioned it in the right place. Again, copy of itself mirrored horizontally, then put that into a copy of itself mirrored vertically. And then combining all those with an add linear dodge, combine that with our other one. So we go from this to this. There we go. We got the little bobules on there. Then we're going to mask off the area that is all the way up here, just inside this circle where the wood is. Okay, so that's where we get this from. Then I'm going to transform, and I think I'm going to transform this and make it a little bit smaller. Yep. And then this guy is, again, cutting off from up here, only within this area. Okay. Then this guy this is a blend using this and our smaller one, I believe. Let's see. Yes, this and this guy. So by cutting those two out, you get this. So we get this, and now we have the inner and this guy. Okay, so those two. Perfect. So then I can bring that over. So this guy here, we just want this star lower. So this is the lower ring here. So then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to bevel him up, blur him, crop him off, do that, throw it into here, the dents and things. He only gets a few right there, but it looks really good. Then we're going to do the same thing with the upper portion. Okay, so from that to this. Very good, very nice. Then we're going to combine those two. Okay, so there we go. So that's our whole star area, which you can see there. And then he goes, of course, and gets added in. There we go. And you can see that they start to kind of lighten up, like this gets darker, this gets lighter. That means that's a change in height. The lighter it gets, the closer it's coming to the camera. So that's what those levels nodes are there to allow us to control that. Okay, so the inner ring, very similar. We're just going to take that ring, put it through the process. Now it's got some nice curvature to it, and it's got a couple of dents in it. Again, the cap is the same thing. We actually end up changing the cap entirely, and you'll see later that as I was working, I found a better way to do it. But so this guy is this cap put into here with all the way over here, this guy. And you see here, I just completely override it. And we'll talk about that override. That's that line. We'll talk about that later. But it made it a lot more of a globe and less of a flattened cylinder. So I really like how that turned out. Okay, so then we need the rivets. So the rivets is a splatter circular to begin with. Again, we're going to borrow from way up here, our smallest circle. And again, I made sure to use my reference to make sure these are rotated correctly. But here's the numbers. Pattern size of 12. Let's see, input. Of course, we want the input. Radius of 0.1. And then the important things are size of 0.1 for X and Y. Scale is 1. And the important part is down here with the ring rotation. So for ring rotation, I have 15 degrees or 0.04. And that gives you a perfect, these two are up and down, these two are up and down, and there's exactly 12 around, which was matching the reference. This matched basically identically to the reference. Okay, so then we, of course, put these guys through the process, put them through, get the dings and dents. I don't think any of them really got too damaged. I think maybe one or two got a little bit of wear and tear on some of the edges of them. But hey, it's a subtle detail, but there it is. Okay, so at the end of the day, we have our height information. So there it is. Height information is done. Very cool. So with that done, what I did was I borrowed from Substance. There's several materials over here. You can see there's metals and there's woods, and that's kind of what I used to create all of this. So directly off of the height, I've been using the normal Sobel. I really like the way that it works, especially for smaller details. Some of these tiny dings and dents, we definitely want that. So a normal Sobel, I'm going to leave it there. And then we have the wood and the metal. And this looks messy, but really all it is just separating out every piece. So I'm not going to go over it too much, but just to give you an idea, essentially everything that I want to be metal is everything that's not the wood areas. So this mask here is created from this, which is created from way over here. So we're going to take in two things. Our top part, which is what we actually use to cut out, is everywhere that is the stars, including all the center stuff, okay? And then this one is the circle, and by subtracting the two, what I get is the circle less everything that is metal. So essentially the wood, right? So you notice here, all the stuff that is coming off of our wood is using this as a mask. Then I bring that down here with a invert grayscale, and now I have everything that else is metal. So everything else is metal, including this and all of this. So this is my metal mask. So essentially all this is doing is saying, hey, I'm going to get metal, so I'm going to pull the metal out of here. And what I'm doing is I'm blending each of these outputs with our height as sort of like an AO. So I'm taking this up here and saying, blend this, multiply. So you're getting the metal, but I'm multiplying in some of the height information, just to kind of bake a little bit of detail down. My normal blend here, I'm blending the normal detail that is coming out of this with the normal from our Sobel. So you can see a little bit of change there in the background here. And again, I masked off only things that are metal, so it takes away the information from the wood. You can see that here. You can see that clearly change. So these dents and divots in the metal, which then becomes wood, now disappears. Okay, and this is our height information there. And you can see here that I'm borrowing from above to eventually spit this out to our final outputs. But for this buckler shield thing, this should really move over there. This is taking our height information, and I'm saying, but take in the height information from the wood. So I'm using this and saying, put this on top of the other wood ones, and then you get this, okay? So, and then down here is, of course, our metal. Yeah, so I'm sorry, this is roughness, metal, and then down here is the height. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where I found a better way to do the bobule in the center. So we did have it set up differently, and this is combining, again, the wood in the background. You can see that. These should really move a little bit, I'm sorry. This is the wood height in the background with our height with some of the metal height information to get these kind of bends in the metal, combining those, everything gets combined and pushed off. Okay, so here I wanted to create a better globe-like effect, and what I did was I used this shape node of a capsule, and I think in here scale is 1. I just kept it normal, but by blending that in on top of this other thing, and I'm using all the way over here the mask again to cut off right at the edges of it. So I think it is a little bit bigger than that technically. Yeah, you can see that. But this is a really nice globe effect. Instead of just having that flattened, you can really tell that it kind of goes up and over. It was being very flat like these, and I didn't like that. Okay, so with all of that complete, let's see. So over here then, let's talk about the sword slashes and the damages. This is really cool stuff. And then the dirt is pretty simple. So to do this is a scratches generator. And I've got random seed of 7, 12 on the splines. I didn't change any of those numbers. Spline scale is 0.36. And this is all kind of salt to taste. how long do you want the slashes and things. I chose the fade mode to be end. Then I'm going to blend this. Let's see, what do we do here? Oh, for some reason it was having trouble going into our input here. So I just throw it into a blend node just as a passing through into the next node. So then put it into normal Sobel with an intensity of 20. Probably too much, but I just wanted it to really kind of dig into the surface. Then I invert it because it was coming up at first. Then we're going to blend it with the rest of our normal information. So there's our other normals blended together. And then we're going to blend it with those. And then we finally have our final normal here. Okay, very cool. So that's how we do this little sword slashes. So for our dirt, of course, from our normal, we're going to create a curvature Sobel and then run it through an edge dirt, blur it just a little bit. I'm also going to create an ambient occlusion, throw that into a dirt node, these two inputs. So we have the curvature and the AO, blur that output just a little bit, and then put these two together with a blend. So this is switch 0.5. I think it came out pretty nice. And then if you put that with your dirt way up here, so this is our final color output for it. And then I'm blending that with just a black color wherever the dirt is. And I think I blend that, yeah, just completely. And it just looks great. So that guy's all complete, and whew, what a bit of work for that. Okay, so let's quickly go over the heater. So let me change out the inputs and then we'll go over to the heater. So let's move this guy over. You can kind of watch him change in the corner there. It's pretty cool. Let's put all this information here. And these guys were pretty complicated to get. I messed that up. To get these working, oh yeah, that's not supposed to go there. There we go. Pretty complicated to actually build, but then once I understood it, then it's a lot easier. Okay, so for the heater, let's create the shape. So beginning with the shape, and let's take a look at our final. I know we'll take a look as we go. So we're going to begin with just a square. So this is a shape node, square 0.5. And then again, like I mentioned, we rotate it 45 degrees. Then I'm going to take a shape, the legacy node. I'm going to use the ringed bell. No change to anything else. Levels, I'm going to clamp this down a little bit. So move this guy down this way a little bit. I'm trying to create kind of this soft in the middle here because we're going to be using it as a warp. Histogram scan. So this is going to be 0.6 on the position and 0.61 on the contrast. Now we're getting this kind of shape. Now, throwing these two into a warp, you can see this center shape is what I'm interested in. I don't really care about the edges, and we'll get rid of that in a second, but this curvature is what I'm looking for. Transform 2D, I'm going to scale it out on the sides to make it a bit wider. What I'm really focusing on is this point, curve all the way up to about the halfway point. So then I'm going to blend that, and you notice that by blending, it goes away. What I'm using is a shape node for a giant circle, and then I have a scale of 0.69, and that means that that circle is just inside this area, so it cuts off all this extra artifacting crap that we don't want. So we'll take just that. Then we're going to do a scale transform, make it bigger, and I made it bigger and moved it down. So this point is almost at the bottom. Then here for this transform, it's a little hard to see, but what I did was I moved the transform point, and that's this guy here. So you notice, let me create a new transform node to show you that when you do a transform, I believe if you hold Alt, yes, you can move the transform scale point. So if I move this point down here, now when I scale, it's going to come from there. Instead of doing from the center, it'll go outward from the center. I can do outward from using that point as kind of a reference. So by doing that and then scaling upwards, I was able to move my shield shape up and off the page, and I get kind of what I'm looking for there. Now going back to our circle here, transform, I'm going to make this giant oval shape. My offset 0.17 and 0 for the X, 0.17 for the Y. And then I'm going to blend that with a square. What I'm trying to get is everything except these corners, okay? So I'm blending that with a transform off of our original square to kind of fill up the rest of this space here. And by putting those two together, I'm going to take this shape where only this exists. So by putting those two together, we get this. And you can see it's really close to the top edge there, but that's okay. And now we have our final shape. Almost our final shape, I should say. Then I'm going to take the circle, transform one more time, scale it a little bit, and move it up to the top. This is what's going to cut out this top section here. So then over here, we blend those two together and I've cut out the top shape. Now we have pretty much our final shape here. Now we're going to do a couple of things with this. One thing is I'm going to throw it into a bevel, and this bevel is a minus 0.1. Then do a color to mask and choose white, and that will give me the inner part. So now I have this, and I have this, which is the outer edge. So I have this guy into a bevel, choose white, I get the inner part. And then by doing this guy, I'm going to subtract the first two. So I'm going to subtract this from this, and I get this. So now I have essentially three masks. I have the entire thing, I have just this outer edge, and I have the inner portion. Perfect. Okay. So now we can do very similar to what we did before. We can bevel these. We're going to blur them. We're going to throw them into the levels, and then we're going to bring them down here and start doing the dings and dents, and we're going to put some dents in them. Okay. So we did that one. Then we're going to do the same thing to the inner frame. There you go. And put those two together. That already looks pretty good. I was working with two different ideas on how to get the shape to kind of bow or bulge outward. So for example here, let's take a look at let's bring this out quite a bit like we had before. Okay, so you can see here how it kind of curves. And to get that curviness to it, I tried a couple different things. First, we got the shape node here, and we're going to scale that up and turn off the tiling. No tiling here. And that gives us this kind of white in the center, and it's kind of gradating off, almost like a omnidirectional gradient. And by putting those two together, you kind of get a little bit of a gradient there. So we tried that. And then also for the outer one, the two have to match because they're designed to kind of be linked, right? So then down here, I tried something different. This was to kind of try to create that center edge. You see there's kind of almost like a seam going down the middle. It's not quite a seam, but it's almost like a ridge. So by doing that, what we did was we took a gradient linear 2. I'm going to use that in a moment, but two gradient linear 1s go in two different directions, which you can change the rotation down here for that. And I did a blend here where I took just the right or left half using the cropping area and transformed and moved them to the other sides. And then put the two together and you create this sort of, it's similar to this, but you'll notice that this gives me all the way to the edge, no black at all, and I have a harsh white line down the middle. When I blend them together, you kind of see this is that shield. It feels familiar, right? So we blend the two together with a multiply 0.5, so I do get a little bit of gradation along the edge here, but then I have this harsh white line down the middle. That's what we really want. So with all of that blended together, we're going to push that up into the diffuse information up here, which we'll talk about how we created all that in just a second. But this guy gets pushed up here and blended in with our final result, so now you have that going on. So that's where we're at so far, okay? Then we're going to create a whole bunch of different things, but let's first talk about how we created the cross, and we'll talk about the pattern, okay? So for the cross, this is our final design here. You can see it here as well, but this is the shape that we're going to create. So we're going to begin with, again, another shape node, and this one has square, scale 0.75, size 0.05 and 1. I'm going to blend that with a transform that I made it smaller and moved it around, so you get your basic cross. Okay. Then we're going to take another scale down. We could have taken one from up there and scaled it down a bit, but a square again, and this is 0.1. Rotate it 45 degrees, position it, and then we're going to do this whole trick again where we move it and then put the two together, and then down here move another copy, put the three together, move a fourth copy, put all four together, put it together with this guy. That looks pretty good right there, but we're going to go a little bit further. We're now going to bevel, and this is just kind of blow it out, almost looks like a pillow, distance of 0.5, okay? Then I'm going to do my color selection again and choose white, and you see that I get the white, and then I get a little bit of a gradation off of that. Very cool. Then using the same bulge thing we got over here, this bell kind of shape, we're going to take that guy, and I'm going to transform them, and I just scaled down until I got a couple repetitions here. Let's blur it out, and you'll see that I'm going to warp it. And we go from this to this. So we're starting to get some disproportionate, like this is a little larger, these guys came in, this guy kind of got a little bit of shape to him. Awesome, I like it. Transform 2D, scale it down a little bit and position it. Then we make a mask out of it by doing our levels and crunching these all the way down a little bit. It gets a little rounded, but that's okay. And then we're going to invert grayscale, so we have the inverse mask as well, because those will be invaluable in a moment. Okay, down here for the heater checker pattern, trying to just kind of get you through the rest of this. So very simple. There's a checker node, very easy. Invert grayscale to get the opposite. I'm going to blend. Oh, my cursor got all weird there. I'm going to blend this guy with the overall shape of the whole shield. Then I'm going to remove the shape of just the cross from it, because we don't want that for both of these. And then you just pick your favorite colors. So I just picked 2 colors from some online reference. Then you see you get these, and then put those together, and that creates that. Okay. So that all gets fed up here into our diffuse. So our diffuse is, once again, taking our height information, using it kind of as an AO from a metal over top, blending that with a multiply of 0.5. Let's bring in, with a 0.5 on the copy, our color information from the heater shield there. And this is the color information from the actual cross. So down here, we're going to take that mask and then blend in a color, which is right here. Blend that in, multiply, so that's our color for our cross. You can change that out at will. Here is our height buildup information. Again, we have the scratches. So different scratches this time. Random 4, only 52 on the spline. 0.31 on the spline scale. Trying to just show you all the things that are different. And I think that's it. And then again, I'm going to crop this so that it's only areas that are on the shield. That makes sense, right? Throw them into a normal Sobel. Again, 20. Again, invert. And then we have our normal map here, which is, I took a copy of one stage of the height buildup, and I put the newly created cross on top of that. And that becomes part of our height information. So that's a height build there. Normal Sobel, combine the two. So combining the height, the normal information that comes from this metal with the normal we've been developing. And then this is getting the wood, because we did want to put the wood in there. So we'll bring the wood up. And again, that comes from all the way down here. We have a couple of different masks going on here. I'll show you that in just a second. But this is all of our final outputs for this. So you see diffuse, normal, roughness, metallic. We're working our way down, right? So then we put all that together and put the scratches on top. Very awesome. And then the exact same setup here for the dirt. Curvature, occlusion, put them through the dirts, blend them together. I was getting this weird banding. You see all these like weird circle kind of artifact looking things. So that I blurred a bit heavier on that to get rid of that. And then put these together again. Switch 0.5, put the final color together. It looks great, especially with the way that the wood grain captures the black of the dirt. Okay, so down here building up our roughness. So we're going to take a copy of our mask from down here. Actually building roughness from the metallic, kind of in inverse order. So metallic is just simple using our mask and then putting the colors we want down. So combining those two, I wanted the cross to be a bit more reflective than the rest of the wood area, which then gets overwritten anyway when we get to the roughness and the metal because of the wood. Then this guy goes up here, and this is an invert, and then blending in the wood. So for the roughness, this is very not rough at all, and this is kind of intermediately rough, depends. Then a height information, pulling in an old copy from way up there, putting on the cross, putting in the wood in the background, and then this is a mask that we created. So this mask here is overall shield shape with the cross missing, so that we can combine that with the cross and the outer rim and the wood. And that becomes our final height information way down there. Okay, I think that's just about everything. Let's take a look around, make sure that we created. We don't need that. Okay, I think that's just about everything. And then all I did was put everything into different frames so that it's nice and easy to move around and, to kind of look at it. It does look like a big ball of spaghetti, but if you follow it, it makes perfect sense. And of course, I'll put the file up. You guys can download it, take a look. I am running 2017.2.2, so you need at least that, if not later, in order to open it up. But I wanted to show you kind of the process and how I thought about it, how I broke it down. And I think we ended up with some pretty awesome looking shields that are entirely procedural. You can go in here and change the colors, swap out different patterns, whatever you want in here. And it kind of creates this for you. And I think they look really good. And especially when the light plays against them right there, just really cool shields. So I'm happy with it. I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited too. This was a lot of fun. So thank you so much for all the comments, questions. You guys have been awesome. All the challenges, please send them in. I have a bit of a backlog because you guys are amazing, but we're getting through it. So I hope you guys appreciate when we bring them up. Let me know how I did. If I missed something, let me know. We'll go back and we'll fix it. Absolutely. So that's all I have for this week, guys. So until next time, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.